Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, entitled The Passing Away of Bhishma Dev. Text 17. Before beginning, I'd like to welcome my dear God brothers, Vyaski Prabhu and Pritu Prabhu. Let us welcome them by loudly chanting Hari. Today is, on our Vaishnav calendar, Bhishmashtami. So it was decided we should speak something about Bhishma Dev today. Today's verse, Bhishma is speaking to Maharaj Yudhisthira. And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is telling how the Lord teaches the world through his devotee. There are many philosophical lessons and very subtle instructions as well in this incredible story. I just came yesterday from Melkote, also known as Tirunarayanpur in South India, one of the four holiest places for the Sri Vaishnav Sampradaya. And every day we climbed a mountain. I believe it has 400 stone steps to reach it. And there is a temple of Lord Narasimha Dev, very ancient. According to the history of that place, Prahlad Maharaj, when he was king, he came there and he was worshipping a Shalagram Shiva on that hill, praying to Krishna to forgive him, because he was thinking that because of me, my father had to die. He was not seeing blame in Hiranyakashipu, he was seeing blame in himself. Why? Just so that I could live, my father had to die. So he was worshipping Krishna, Lord Narasimha Dev, in the form of the Shalagram to forgive him for his offense. He was lamenting. He was really seriously lamenting. Then he went down to the Kalyani, it's a very ancient kund, and when he came back up, the Shalagram Shiva had manifested into this magnificent self-manifesting form of Narasimha, Yoga Narasimha. And Narasimha spoke. He told Prahlad, it's not your fault. Actually, your father, it was due to his own sins that he just had to be removed from this world. Don't blame yourself anymore. And besides that, because of your loving devotion and your prayers for him, I have given him liberation. So in this way, Prahlad was pacified. Very inconceivable, the mind of a Vaishnava. Even when somebody creates the greatest injustices, a devotee is thinking, because of me. And we have a very similar story here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj Yudhisthira was faultless. He was honor and integrity personified. He didn't want harm to anyone. But Duryodhana was so envious. And his comrades, Dushasana, Shakuni, Karna, they all joined him. And he even convinced his own father, Dhritarashtra, to join this campaign where the innocent Yudhisthira and his brothers, who were the rightful heirs to the throne, they were cheated, they were blasphemed. In order to disgrace them, they tried to strip Draupadi naked in an assembly of men. They tried to burn them alive, horrible, horrible death in the house of lac. They exiled them to the forest for 12 years. And while they were there, that wasn't bad enough. Duryodhana sent people to humiliate them and disgrace them in the forest. He even made plans to murder them. And ultimately, when the exile was done, Yudhisthira Maharaj was so patient and so kind. We're Kshatriyas, we need something to rule over. Give us 5 villages, one each. You could have the rest of the world. Duryodhana, his response, I will not give them enough land that you can pierce the head of a needle through. He was so envious. He was living by such a treacherous example. He was the personification of adharma. And meanwhile, Yudhisthira Maharaj was always his well-wisher. He was kind. And finally, it was Krishna that decided this war of Kurukshetra has to happen. Krishna was a messenger trying to avert this war. Yudhisthira Maharaj was trying by any means for an alternative in this war. But Duryodhana was so egoistic, so obsessed in his hatred, that ultimately the war had to be fought. And even during the war, there were times where Yudhisthira Maharaj was ready to give everything back to Duryodhana if he just gives the slightest concession. After Kurukshetra, so many people died. And Yudhisthira Maharaj was coronated as king. And here he is, lamenting like Prahlad. Because of me, all these people had to die. Because of me, all these women are widows. And all these children have no father. All so that I can sit on the throne. Prahlad Maharaj was also sitting on the throne. This may seem illogical. It may seem impractical. But it's Vaishnavera Kriya Mudra Vikena Bhujai. It's the inconceivable nature of the heart of a devotee, a true devotee. Just the opposite of material conditioning. We are very eager to blame people. Blame people for what they've done against us. Blame people for our own shortcomings. Blame either other people or circumstances or material nature or God or anything or anyone for our mistakes, for our failures. But a devotee, even when actually for a conditioned soul, even when they're completely wrong themselves, they want to blame somebody else. That's the ego. But a devotee has no inclination to blame others or to criticize. Rupa Goswami explains this is one of the qualities of a devotee. That the propensity to criticize others is not in that person's heart. In the case of Prahlad Maharaj, Nrsimhadev had to manifest again just to pacify him. In the case of Yudhisthira Maharaj, so many people were trying to tell Yudhisthira, it's not your fault. And Krishna, by his own love for his devotee, Bhishma Dev, he, by his own free will, was unable to pacify Yudhisthira Maharaj. So he brought Yudhisthira Maharaj from Hastinapur back to Kurukshetra with the Pandavas, because Krishna wanted Bhishma to get that credit of speaking the highest truth to pacify the heart of Yudhisthira. And also, Bhishma, who was laying in a bed of arrows, from his neck to his feet, you couldn't put your finger between two arrows. There were so many arrows. And what a Vaishnav Bhishma was. He was such a powerful warrior that when Duryodhana incited him to really put his heart and soul into the fighting, because previously he's actually in his heart, he was on the Pandava side. But due to the inconceivable arrangement of Krishna to teach the world another lesson, he was on the side of the Kurus. Here is a Mahajan fighting for the enemies of the devotees. Of course, from the external perspective, it is said because Bhishma was honorable, he could not be the king because he made that vow just to honor his father, that he would never take the throne and he would never marry or have children who could take the throne. So ultimately, he was watching as Duryodhana was persecuting and trying to destroy the Pandavas. And actually, Bhishma and Vidura were always advising Dhritarashtra not to follow his son, because he was going to cause the ruination of everything. But Dhritarashtra was so sentimentally attached to his son. In fact, sometimes when Dhritarashtra would become a little soft toward the Pandavas, Duryodhana would threaten to kill himself if his father didn't strongly stand with him. And Dhritarashtra was just not only physically blind, but he was spiritually blinded by his affection for this son. But Vidura and Bhishma, and sometimes Drona also, they would be giving him good advice, but he couldn't follow. And sometimes they would chastise Duryodhana, but he couldn't hear anything. This is the nature of the false ego. Even the best advice from the best well-wishers, we cannot hear because we're clouded over by obsessions. Came to the point where Vidura, the younger brother of Dhritarashtra, he was telling his brother that stop being influenced by your son. He is envy personified, offense personified. Everything will be destroyed if you follow him. And Duryodhana heard that. Outraged, he banished Vidura from his home, from his family, and from the kingdom. And Dhritarashtra didn't say a word. He let it happen. But still, Duryodhana was the king, and from the perspective of mundane dharma, it's the duty of everyone to support the king. Duryodhana was maintaining Bhishma, and Duryodhana asked him to be the commander-in-chief, so Bhishma had to do it. But actually, he didn't have to do it. According to Srila Prabhupada, he was just so surrendered to Krishna. He knew that the Pandavas would win and the Kurus would die. Why? Because he knew that Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas. But Krishna had a plan just to show even the greatest person in the world is going to be defeated if he's on the wrongs, if he's against Dharma, if he's not on the side of God. So during the war, Duryodhana, he really started criticizing Bhishma so bad because he was sentimental toward the Pandavas. So Bhishma said, okay, tomorrow I'm really going to fight. And he did. He was like a cyclone. Nothing could stand before him. He destroyed a major part of the entire Pandava army single-handedly in one day. And Bhima with his club, Arjuna with his bow and arrow, Yudhishthira, Sahadev, Nakula, great warriors, Drishtajumna, all they could do is stand on the side and watch. There was no possibility of even fighting against him. He was too much. They tried, but it's like, throwing a stick into a cyclone. That was the military status of Bhishma. And when the sun set, Bhishma honorably stopped fighting. But it was obvious that the next day when the sun rised, no one would survive the Pandavas. Bhishma would destroy everything. Now Bhishma told Duryodhana, I could kill everyone on this field, but I can't kill the Pandavas because they're personally protected by Krishna. Now Yudhisthira Maharaj was thinking, all these people who have given their lives to support me, they're all being massacred by my grandfather. He was very, very, it was a lost cause. There was nothing they could do. But then Krishna, he knew the heart of Bhishma. He said, we should go at night, secretly, to his tent and ask his permission and ask for instructions to kill him and how to kill him. Now this is a very different type of battle with honor. So Krishna and the 5 Pandavas, quietly in the dark of night, they went over the lines to where the Kurus were and went right to Bhishma's tent. Meanwhile, Duryodhana was glowing with joy because he knew tomorrow everything's finished and I will be victorious. And when they came before Bhishma, the Pandavas started to cry. Bhishma welcomed them with so much love. He was their grandfather and they were his favorite grandchildren. Why are you crying? Why do you look so disturbed? And ultimately, they had to speak. We are fighting for Krishna. We can't fight against you. Please tell us how we could kill you and give us your blessings to do so. Now this was more painful for Yudhisthira and Bhima and Arjuna to ask. It was really painful because they loved Bhishma. As far as they were concerned, besides Krishna, they had no greater well-wishers in the world than Bhishma and Vidura. They personally saved their lives on many occasions. Even though due to circumstances, they were in a very difficult situation, having to fight for the Kurus. So their hearts were heaving with agony to ask this question. Just put yourself in the Pandava's position. Because we have to understand these stories from the human side. Because Vaishnavas are humans with soft hearts. Even if they're totally transcendental. Think about going to your own father or grandfather and asking, give me your blessings to kill you. When they're at the peak of health, and at the peak of their career, as Bhishma was. Very, very painful. But as soon as they asked the question, Bhishma went into ecstasy. He was smiling, glowing with joy. I was waiting for the day you would ask me this question. And it's a long story, but he told his own story. And ultimately he gave them the instructions. Arjuna, you're the only one who can shoot these arrows through me. So on the battlefield, bring, Shikandi? Yes, bring her before me. Him, her, whatever. There's a story of that. Where he was just trying to honor his vow before God and his father. He was implicated in all these difficulties. Yes, the material world is so complicated. Even if you're good, you get complicated and implicated in all kinds of troubles. I won't go so much into that story, but he vowed he would never marry. But then on the request of Satyavati, he tried to get some princesses for the prince. Yes, so he helped out, and one of those princesses, she was just about to get married to somebody else, and when she told Vichitravirya, the prince, about that, and he said, well, I can't marry you then. Then she went back to the person she was supposed to marry, and he said, well, Bhishma touched you because he kidnapped you to bring you to this other man, so I can't marry you. And nobody will marry you because you've been touched by someone else. It's high standards in those days. These were Kshatriyas. It was honor. She didn't want to be a widow. So the only person in the world was Bhishma, because he touched her. And all he did is grab her by the hand and put her on the chariot. It wasn't anything romantic. So what to do? So she went to Satyavati, and Satyavati said, Bhishma, you should do it. Bhishma said, I made this vow, I can't do it. And she went to Parasuram, and Parasuram fought with Bhishma. So she worshipped Shiva and ended up becoming a warrior. Shikandi, who was born specifically to help kill Bhishma. Now, actually, secretly, Bhishma revealed it was out of her love, because Bhishma wanted to die. He had this benediction that no one could kill him. Yes? Until he desired to die himself. And he couldn't commit suicide, because that's sinful. And nobody could kill him. But actually, seeing the injustices against the Pandavas, he didn't want to be in this world. All his brothers got to go back to their abode, but somehow or other he had to stay in this world, and he knew he wasn't this body. He wanted to go back to Godhead. He loved Krishna. So he took this as the greatest opportunity. Bring Shikandi, and then Arjuna, shoot your arrows. So the next day in the battlefield, everything was exactly. And Arjuna was shooting the arrows. But Arjuna loved Bhishma too much. He couldn't shoot him hard. And Bhishma was telling him, shoot harder. Because Bhishma's body was very like a mountain. And Arjuna had to shoot with all of his strength to penetrate his body. And Bhishma lay down in a bed of arrows. Now Kurukshetra in January is very cold. And he was laying there. In honor of Bhishma, the entire battle stopped right at that moment when he fell to the ground. And all the warriors from both the Pandavas and the Kurus, they all went and personally honored Bhishma for his greatness and glory. And in his honor, they stopped fighting that day. And the next day, they began again. And Bhishma was laying there. But amazingly, he did not die, because his blessing was only at his own will. Even that. Can you imagine? If one arrow pierces our body, we're finished. He had hundreds of them. Can you imagine the pain? But he remained alive through the rest of the battle. And then Krishna went down to Hastinapur after the last rites of all the devotees, all the warriors who were on the battlefield, he was alive. Then the coronation of Krishna, and then the Yudhisthira Maharaj was lamenting. Bhishma knew that Krishna would come back for him. He had that faith. He only wanted to die seeing the beautiful moon-like form of Krishna, Shamsundar. He had that faith. He was waiting on the cold, dusty ground of Kurukshetra all alone for many days. And Krishna actually brought Yudhisthira back there for these two reasons. One, to glorify Bhishma, to show his power, to inspire and give courage and happiness to Yudhisthira, to instruct the whole world through Yudhisthira. But on the highest platform, Krishna wanted to fulfill Bhishma's heart's desire to stand before him at the moment of death. So here we have Krishna and the Pandavas all bowing down before Yudhisthira Maharaj. And Krishna blessed Bhishma. They all bowed down to Bhishma. Krishna blessed Bhishma to speak these profound truths, to relieve him of all pain so that he can speak. And toward the end of the discussion, in these particular verses that we're reading today, Bhishma, who is a Mahajan, one of the 12 highest, most learned authorities on knowledge, is admitting no one can understand the plan of the Lord. Why did the Pandavas have to undergo such difficulties? In some of the verses, Bhishma said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmins, God, and religion. As far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, upon the great General Pandu's death, she became a widow with many children, and therefore she suffered greatly. And when you were grown up, she suffered a great deal also because of your actions." How is it that Kunti, who was so absolutely pure in her devotion, in her love, in her piety, she had to suffer more than anyone? Yes, Draupadi suffered when they were trying to strip her away, but she surrendered to Krishna and Krishna protected her. But then she was exiled to the forest. And the Pandavas, how difficult. There was so much horrible propaganda against them. They were traveling around, living just 2 days ago in Melkote. There's a village named after the Pandavas, because the Pandavas came there. And we went to one place. It takes some time to walk there. Very few people go there. But there are 5 caves where the Pandavas lived. Have you been there, Mahaprabhu? Melkote? Yeah, they're caves. And considering that Yudhisthira Maharaj and his brothers, they were living as the kings of Hastinapur, that was their natural right. When you go and look at these caves, they're real small, simple little caves. As far as caves go, they're actually nice caves. For those of you who have lived in caves, they're quite nice caves. But they're caves. It's no place for a king. There's no door. You don't have a front door on your cave. Can't lock it. You don't have any furniture. No kitchen. It's just you just sleep on the rocks. And you go out and search for some berries or fruits from the trees or roots, or you go begging from some house. Yes, I was sitting in the caves, just marveling at what the Pandavas had to go through. But multiply that by hundreds of times, and we can get some glimpse of what Kunti had to go through. Because she had that love of a mother seeing her children in that condition. Not only unbearable, but inconceivable. So Bhishma, who was very, very close, he considered Kunti his own daughter-in-law, and he loved her like a daughter. This is the disciplic succession of suffering. Kunti suffered so bad to see her children, her son suffering, and Bhishma is suffering, seeing his daughter suffering. Why? Bhishma is asking this question, why? There's laws of karma where you're supposed to get what you deserve. Kunti didn't deserve this. The Pandavas didn't deserve this. Why? Then Bhishma gives his opinion. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhisthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion? Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. Bhishma says to Yudhisthira Maharaj, O king, no one can know the plan of Lord Sri Krishna, even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively. They are bewildered. O best among the descendants of Bharat, I maintain, therefore, that all this is within the plan of the Lord. Accepting the inconceivable plan of the Lord, you must follow it. You are now the appointed administrative head, and my Lord, you should now take care of those subjects who are now rendered helpless. In this verse today, what Bhishma is essentially telling Yudhisthira Maharaj is we really just have to have faith in the perfection of Krishna. We cannot understand the details of why he does what he does. What to speak of Krishna, the controller of all controllers? We can't even understand the details of the laws of karma, which are just mundane laws. We can understand the principle, and we can take the proper medicine. Just like if you get malaria, and if you stay in Bombay long enough, you probably will. And it's very high fever. Come to give you medicine. I want to know which mosquito bit me. I want to know the date and the time that I was bitten, and I want to know the exact location on my body where I was bitten. Now, there's very few cases of malaria where anyone can trace out all those details. In fact, it's very difficult to trace out even one of them. But we understand a principle. If I have this fever and the malaria germ's in me, I may not know which mosquito, I may not know where I was when I was bitten, I don't know where I was bitten, may not know what date or time, but I know I was bitten, so I should take the medicine. So why we're suffering, what the karmic is, we may not understand exactly what the karma was of why I'm suffering. But we can understand the principle that I did something. And therefore, two things. When you're sick, you prevent doing the same thing again. We shouldn't hurt others. We shouldn't cause others pain. We shouldn't engage in immoral activities. Because if I do, I'm going to have to suffer. And I'm suffering, and I don't want to do this again, so I'm going to give up this offensiveness. And second thing is you take the medicine. Enechi ashadi maya nashi borolagi harinam mahamantra lao tumi magi. Sarva dharman purityajya mamekam sharanam praja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishamimasuja. Krishna says, I will deliver you from all sinful reactions. You may not know the details, but I'll deliver all of them if you just surrender to me. And Krishna himself comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to tell us how to surrender. He's appeared in his holy name. Golokera Premadana Harinam Sankirtan. Kali Kale Namarupe Krishna Avatar. Krishna's in his name. With humility, tolerance, offering all respect to others and not expecting it ourselves. Very feelingly, we should take shelter by surrendering to the holy name. Bhishma is telling Yudhisthira, you may not understand it, but you're a surrendered soul. Whether you understand or don't understand, just carry on with your devotional service. He's saying you're the king, it's your responsibility, it's your duty to Krishna. Go back and rule the kingdom. They are helpless. This is an amazing verse. Whether we understand or not, our service as the Lord is ultimately to be an instrument of compassion to people who are suffering. Just carry on with your service. Matra sparashastu konteya sitosna sukadukada agama payano nityas tamstatiksha bharata. Srila Prabhupada explains that this tolerating the reversals of the summers and the winter seasons of happiness and distress and honor and dishonor and pleasure and pain and all this, the way we tolerate it is we just carry on with our devotional service. This is what he's telling Yudhishthira. And the greatest service we could render is to help Srila Prabhupada, in our case, to give Krishna consciousness to others. And we find that when the Lord puts his devotees in these types of reversals, even for long times, if the devotees just go on with their service with humility and faith, Krishna makes those reversals into something very auspicious. Can I tell you another story of Melkote? I'm going to miss my airplane, but I will take the risk. Ramanujacharya is the great disciple of Yamunacharya. He was the most powerful acharya in all of South India. He was living in Sri Rangam, and he had thousands and thousands and thousands of disciples. People loved him. One of his disciples was a grihastha named Quresh.